Hello everyone, welcome to the second part of the High Availability series. In this tech vid, I'll show you the steps to configure High Availability or HA in your environment. Make sure you watch part 1 before proceeding, which covers the differences between active-active and active-passive, general workflow, common failover triggers, and the requirements for HA deployment. You can find a link to that tech vid in the video description. In this tech vid, I'll guide you through the configuration of both HA modes available in Sophos Firewall. First, I'll talk about the prerequisites for configuring Quick HA, the simplest method with the fewest configuration steps. Then I'll guide you through the HA configuration using Quick HA mode. Afterwards, I'll go over the prerequisites for Interactive mode, which is a legacy mode that allows you to manually configure all HA parameters, and demonstrate how to configure HA with Interactive mode. Let's get started with Quick HA mode. To set up Quick HA, first ensure both firewalls are connected with a network cable plugged into each unit's dedicated HA port. In Quick HA mode, you only need to specify the initial device role, node name, and dedicated HA link on each device. Additionally, the firewall automatically assigns interfaces to some HA ports. For example, if you use port 1 to access the web admin, port 1 and its associated IP will become the administrator port. Ensure that the admin ports belong to the same subnet in both devices and the host IP addresses are unique. For higher-end models, this applies to the management ports instead. If the primary device is 172.16.16.16, then the auxiliary must be different. For example, 172.16.16.17. For both appliances, make sure to check the dedicated HA link port, as any configuration that depends on this interface will be wiped. Also, make sure to set a static IP. Note that the dedicated HA link and monitor port cannot use the same interface. You're now ready to configure HA using Quick HA mode. Navigate to System Services and ensure you're in the High Availability tab. Since this is the primary firewall, choose whether to use Active-Passive or Active-Active for the initial device role. Check Quick HA mode and change the node name if you wish. A passphrase is automatically generated, but you can override this with your own secure password if desired. Take note of this, as the same passphrase must be added to the auxiliary device later. This is only utilized once to generate the SSH keys used to encrypt communication over the HA link. Once generated, the passphrase is then deleted from the system. Next, select the dedicated HA link. Click Add New Item and select the interface to synchronize data and heartbeat information between HA devices. Select up to 4 interfaces for link redundancy. The options are as follows: DMC interfaces, including physical, LAG, and VLAN interfaces, or unbound physical interfaces. Note, in Quick HA mode, the firewall automatically assigns the DMC zone and the default IP address 169.254.19.2.1 to the interface. It also enables SSH for the zone. Click Initiate HA. This completes the primary appliance configuration. Next, switch to the auxiliary firewall and log into its web admin console. Once again, go to System Services and open the High Availability tab. This time, choose Auxiliary for the device role. Select Quick HA mode and change the node name if desired. Enter the same passphrase used for the primary firewall. Choose the same port for the dedicated HA link as the primary and click Initiate HA. The HA configuration is now complete. After HA is established, you can configure the advanced settings in the primary device as follows. Under Select Ports to be monitored, select one or more to monitor critical ports for their availability. If a monitor port goes down, the device considers itself unavailable and failover occurs. Specify the following peer administration settings to access the auxiliary device's web admin console. Select an interface. Enter an IP address according to your environment. In my case, I will use port 1 for the interface and 172.16.16.20 as the IP address. For the preferred primary device, choose which firewall acts as the primary after the system recovers from a failover. We recommend that you select the primary firewall as the preferred or initial primary device. The keep alive request interval specifies the time in milliseconds for the heartbeat packet exchanged by HA peers to confirm that the HA cluster is functioning. Keep alive attempts refers to the number of attempts the system will make before determining a device has failed. Adjust the keep alive settings as required. Lastly, the use host or hypervisor assigned MAC address is only relevant if you deploy in the firewall in a virtual environment such as a hypervisor like VMware or Hyper-V. If this is the case, this option must be enabled as it requires MAC ACLs to be allowed on hypervisors and sometimes users do not have admin rights over them. For the virtual switch, also ensure that the port connected to the device is set to promiscuous mode. Click Apply to complete the setup. You've successfully configured Quick HA mode. Next, I'll demonstrate how to configure HA using interactive mode. Before you start configuring interactive mode, I'll quickly review the major prerequisites for high availability covered in Part 1. Ensure the dedicated HA port of the firewall is in the DMZ and the SSH service is enabled. The IP addresses of both the primary and auxiliary devices must be within the same subnet. For active-passive setup, only one license is required, which must be applied to the primary device. In active-active setups, configure the auxiliary device first. Before starting, make sure that the administrator ports in the primary and auxiliary devices belong to the same subnet and their IP host addresses are different. Additionally, make sure the dedicated HA link does not have any dependent configurations, as they'll be erased and only use static IPs in these ports. If you need more information on the prerequisites, refer to Part 1 of this series and the link documentation in the description. Now, start by configuring the auxiliary device. Go to Administration and open the Device Access tab. Select DMZ under SSH and click Apply. Go to System Services and make sure you're on the High Availability tab. Set Initial Device Role to Auxiliary. Set the HA configuration mode to Interactive mode. If you need to change the node name, you can do this here. As with Quick HA mode, the firewall auto-generates a passphrase that you can change if desired. Remember, you must enter this passphrase later on in the primary device as well. Select the port that will be used for the dedicated HA link. Only ports that are in the DMZ will appear here. As a reminder, the same port must be used on both devices. The ports can be connected directly with a crossover cable or via a switch. Click Save, and the auxiliary device is now set up. Switch over to the primary device. Log into the primary device web admin. Go to System Services and open the High Availability tab. Here, select the appropriate device role base, active-active or active-passive. Make sure the HA configuration mode is set to interactive mode. By default, the cluster ID is set to 0. If you have multiple HA pairs in the network, assign a different cluster ID for each pair to prevent virtual MAC address conflicts. Enter the passphrase that will be used to generate the private or public keys to secure the communication between firewalls. This is the same key that was just set on the auxiliary device. For the dedicated HA link and IPv4 address, choose the same port used for the dedicated HA link on the auxiliary device. Once again, note that only ports in a some type of DMZ will be available to select. Under dedicated peer HA link IPv4 address, enter the auxiliary device's dedicated HA link address. In my case, I'll use 169.255.255.2. Next, choose the critical ports that need to be monitored. If the connection to any of these ports fail, the device will leave the cluster and the cluster will fail over to the auxiliary device. Under Peer Administration setting, enter the IP address of the auxiliary device. This is the IP address of the port for the dedicated HA link. I'll enter 172.16.16.20. You can also configure multiple peer IPs here by clicking the plus button. For the preferred primary device, choose which firewall acts as the primary after the system recovers from a failover. We recommend that you select the primary firewall as the preferred or initial primary device. The keep alive request interval specifies the time in milliseconds for the heartbeat packet exchanged by HA peers to confirm that the HA cluster is functioning. Keep alive attempts refers to the number of attempts the system will make before determining a device has failed. Adjust the keep alive settings as required. Lastly, the use host or hypervisor assigned MAC address is only relevant if you're deploying the firewall in a virtual environment such as a hypervisor like VMware or Hyper-V. If this is the case, this option must be enabled as it requires MAC ACLs to be allowed on hypervisors and sometimes users do not have admin rights over them. For the virtual switch, also ensure that the port connected to the device is set to promiscuous mode. Click Initiate HA to complete the setup. And just like that, high availability is now up and running. I hope you found this useful. Check out the relevant documentation linked in the video description. For further assistance, view and post questions on community.sophos.com. And go to techbits.sophos.com for more great videos like this one. Thanks for watching.